if we left tankers on our coastline,
Yeah,
we'll have spills.
well, just freighters,
Yeah.
just from the fuel oil, the bunker safe.
Yeah.
Well, the bitumen and diluent are, and that was acknowledged in the Enbridge Joint Review Panel, which is another weakness of the report, that Enbridge hasn't done any studies on bitumen and diluent. They
That's
just
right.
assume it will
They don't
behave
know.
the same. But we know in Kalamazoo, Michigan, at least in freshwater, Kalamazoo River, it didn't behave anything like crude.
No, it goes to the bottom.
It all sank.
It sank and
It
it
did, it
separated.
sank,
So
yeah.
some of it volatilized off and made people sick because the diluent is, it's like naphtha, right? So it's a natural gas condensate, but they add to it. They add benzene,
Yeah.
which is a carcinogenic, and it's a very volatile substance. They also add butane, which is lighter fluid. This diluent stuff isn't a particular chemical. It's like saying we're bringing you goop. The word diluent doesn't tell you anything. But what we don't actually have is oil there. What we have is bitumen.
Yeah.
And the argument that I've made, and there's some of the handouts that I have outside, there's a piece about putting all the jigsaw pieces together that looks at energy policy. If Canada had an energy policy, it seemed to me that one of the things we'd want to have in the energy policy is energy security. So before exporting oil, maybe we should make sure we've covered our own uses. Before having a policy about expanding our oil sands operations, we should also have a climate policy to make sure we know how we would manage this and still reach the targets even though Harper's targets are weak, he hasn't done anything to be able to hit them. So we're going to it's really quite horrible on that level. So if we could imagine what we might do in oil sands development that was of benefit to Canada economically and met a climate target, we would probably just slow the development to not much more than what it is now. Interestingly enough, the Conservative MP for Fort McMurray just quit and is now saying publicly, we've got to slow down development of Fort McMurray, slow down the oil sands. Yeah, said that publicly. Because it's the lack of infrastructure for the community of Fort McMurray. The development is causing the town to lose, it's got tons of people moving in, but it lacks roads. He said, look, just slow it down till the infrastructure can catch up. But if you slowed it down also and said, look, why are we shipping out raw bitumen? Why do we want to ship out raw bitumen, ship in diluent? The only reason we're shipping in diluent is because bitumen, even after all the processing they go through, bitumen doesn't flow. It's a solid. It's virtually a solid. It doesn't go anywhere. So that's why they want to ship in the diluent, mix it up with the bitumen, ship it out to refineries in other countries. So if we wanted to have more jobs, production in Alberta, climate policy, and energy security, we would insist that we don't export anything until, number one, they upgrade it in northern Alberta, then you don't need the diluent, and it can flow. Refine it in Canada, and use it for eastern Canada, because right now half the oil we use in Canada comes from overseas, from Nigeria and Venezuela, and every province from Ontario east is relying on imported oil. And rather than ship it unprocessed on the Keystone route to Gulf of Mexico refineries, unprocessed across northern Alberta, and across northern British Columbia, worse, to Kitimat for tankers, insist on processing it out in Alberta. The amount of greenhouse gases, if we don't allow the oil sands, right now Harper wants them to triple production. From right now it's just under 2 million barrels of oil a day. Harper wants it to be 6 million barrels of oil a day. Right now, the amount of oil sands production is about the same in terms of greenhouse gases as the coal-fired power plants in Alberta. It used to be the coal-fired power plants were more CO2 than the oil sands, but as the oil sands expand, they've come to be about level. So if we were closing down coal-fired power plants right across Canada, which we're not, the level and improving energy efficiency in homes, in other words, we could actually be producing bitumen and processing it in northern Alberta and reducing greenhouse gases to half of what we're currently using if we had a kind of a sensible plan. So I don't have to say publicly, and the Green Party doesn't have to say that we should shut down the oil sands. Number one, we can't because it's an Alberta resource. We could say, because the federal government, at least before Harper destroyed so many of our laws, used to have permitting powers to say no because of construction of fisheries, no because it's an environmental assessment review, no because of species at risk. You can't go, so the federal government does have some levers, but they don't, right now, we don't have anything like control of the tailing ponds and the water pollution. We're not controlling air pollution. We're not controlling greenhouse gases. This court case that Neil Young was fundraising for, the Athabasca Chipewyan, I'm not saying it right, the Chipewyan, but it's a great, but that First Nation has a very, very strong case because the Environmental Review Panel itself said there will be serious negative adverse effects on the environment and on the traditional way of life and the traditional treaty rights of the Athabasca Chipewyan. And they said it with a lot of conditions and recommendations with, I think it was 88 conditions. The federal cabinet approved it as is. And actually, Leona Aglukkaq, as Minister of Environment, confirmed this will have serious negative adverse effects, cumulative effects. So their court case is a really important one because the Shell Jack Pine expansion, it's the expansion of these things. So right now, the existing amount of land that's been basically forests removed, muskeg removed, rivers, lakes, everything removed, it's 715 square kilometers of existing what they've done. So 715 square kilometers is a huge area where there's absolutely nothing but the mines, the open pit mines. If it were to stay at more or less that, you can't expand a new one till an old one closes. And we're going to be producing maybe 2 million barrels of oil of bitumen, 2 million barrels a day. That's a lot, but we're not going to let you ship it out till you process it in Alberta. You create a lot more jobs that way, and then use it in Canada first. And over time, we'd stop burning it because it's stupid to burn a petroleum product. It's more valuable as feedstock to all kinds of other industries, petrochemical industries, and plastics and whatnot. So I know I'm rattling on and on about this, but there's a way through this as a country if we actually could have a discussion about it. But it comes down to the media. As soon as you say anything about the oil sands being an environmental disaster, then you're against Alberta.